Now on to our first debate. It was revealed this week that global office sharing company WeWork are going meat-free. They're banning workers from claiming expenses for meals containing meat and no longer serving it at company events. Well, new research published in the Journal of Science warns that worldwide meat eating is set to rise steeply over the coming years. It says that it could lead to more illness and potentially devastating environmental issues. So, should we all be cutting down? Our question today, is it wrong to eat meat? Well, joining us to give us their views from the Soil Association, Liz Bowles, author and journalist Naomi Furst, co-founder of Veganuary, Matthew Glover, and still with us, broadcaster and journalist Nilofer Hediad. Well, Naomi, if a business wants their employees to be more healthy, more environmentally friendly, doing this sort of thing, banning meat, that's a good thing, isn't it?
I don't think that's the role of a business to make that kind of choice for their employees. You know, I respect everyone's individual right. I'm personally not a vegan, I eat meat, and if I understand the reasons why someone might want to eliminate animal products from their diet, and I respect that, but I think it's very much a case of live and let live. If someone doesn't want to eat meat, they don't eat meat, and if someone does, they do.
But they're claiming expenses. They're having food on work time. They're claiming expenses from the company. The company say we don't want to be a part of that. That's fair enough, isn't it?
But if they're allowed to claim expenses for eating vegan food, then you're basically forcing your ideology onto your employees, which isn't the place of a business.
Nilofer, veganism, which of course is when people don't eat any meat or any animal products, so meat, dairy, cheese,
wool,
all those sorts of things.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It does seem to be growing in popularity.
Yes.
But would you say that's a fad? I mean, we've had loads of these things, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, you've had the paleo diet and you've had the grass-only diet. I mean, there's a plethora of those kind of things. But I love what Naomi said, live and let live. So to have a diet in which you cause no violence, in which you don't allow any living entity to be hurt or harmed is the best thing to do. And it should genuinely be the baseline for any discussion we have. Eating meat or cultivating meat or growing meat is a privilege. It is not a right that we all have. And if we even talk about 10, 15 years ago, we did not have as much meat in our diets as we do now. So to say that this is like a right and WeWorks, and I commend them for what they've done, to take it away is a bad thing is not right.
Liz, I mean, you put it like that. It's quite interesting, isn't it? We are taking a life just so that we can have steak on our table. I mean, put it like that, you sort of think, a life for that? Is it worth it?
Taking it back a bit, really. I mean, looking at it in the round, agriculture, farmers, livestock, we've all evolved together. And certainly I'd agree with Nilofer that we do need to eat less meat. And certainly at the Soil Association, we talk about less meat, but better. And by better, I mean meat that's been produced under high animal welfare systems. And a thing which perhaps people don't know so much about has been produced with a minimum amount of cereals and grains in the diet, because in terms of climate change, that's a really significant issue. And going forward, we're going to be talking an awful lot more about that than even whether we eat meat or not. It's about how our food is produced.
But I'm not sure that the sheep that you raise would care whether they have been raised ethically or non-ethically. They're still going to be killed. I don't know if they have an opinion on whether it's done in a humane, which I have a massive issue with in the first place, way or not. I think for them, if they're being raised not to the end of their life, I mean, a sheep can live for 14, 16 years and we kill them much earlier than that. I don't think that's justifiable to the animal.
OK, I mean, to answer that specifically, I would say that, I mean, I have been a sheep farmer now for 20 years and I come from a farming family, so I guess you could say we've got a bit of a vested interest. But having said that, animals aren't humans, and by treating them ethically, what I mean is looking after their behavioural and welfare needs during their life, whether that be 14 years or whether it be 8 months.
They're sentient, they feel pain.
OK, let's bring Matthew in. You started Veganuary, didn't you? I almost couldn't say it, Veganuary.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, that's basically where you're encouraging people for the month of January to not eat any meat products, to not have anything to do with animal products. That's just a trend, isn't it?
No, this is something that it's a social justice issue. We need to move society to being more civilised. I think if you were to look in 100 years' time, people will look back at this and think that they won't be able to believe how inhumane it is. And I think
It's
if you
uncivilised to eat meat.
Yeah, absolutely. In the same way, if you think 250 years ago, if you would have asked people in the streets whether it was okay to have a slave trade, 95% of people would have agreed and said that that was acceptable. They would have bought the products.
So we're equating the slave trade to eating meat, and you think that this is something we will look back on and say, how on earth did we do that?
This is a modern-day slave trade. I mean, these animals are forced into barns.
They're animals, though.
Yeah.
They're animals.
Well, we're animals as well. It's species,
I know, but the slave... I mean, that's a big jump, isn't it? The slave trade...
That's a very extreme thing to say, to compare the slaughter of animals for food to the slave trade. I think is an extreme and quite outrageous thing to say. And again, I think so Nellifer said she sort of agreed with live and let live, but then you sort of went on to contradict yourself. When I say live and let live, I mean I respect a vegan or a vegetarian's choices in that they choose not to eat animal products, and I can understand their reasons why. I personally don't have a moral issue with eating meat, and I think that those choices should also be respected. And when you have a company like WeWork who's effectively enforcing their ideology on people, and people, you know, and vegans saying that it's equivalent to slave trade, that's where you're getting into this realm of you're trying to shame other people for their choices. I wouldn't shame a vegan for their choices.
Okay, well, let's
they can shame me.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. So firstly, when someone else is being killed for your dietary options, that's not a choice. You can't have violence or death be part of a choice that you make. So that's a moot point. It's null and void. The second thing is,
we're talking about animals.
Bear with me.
There's a difference.
Bear with me. The other main thing is that I made an 8-part series called Food Exposed, and all I did was for a year was trace all different elements, GMOs, water industry, the dairy industry, of how food is created and how we in the first world eat it. And when we understand the industrial food complex of which you're speaking about, in terms of how it oppresses people, how it keeps the developing world poor, how it causes cancers and illnesses for thousands of farmers who don't live in Britain, who live in Guatemala or Argentina, then we know that this isn't just, we can't see this through the prism of the first world, which is where we are talking on this.
So we'll get on to many of those issues in just a moment. We're going to press pause in the studio for a moment. Let's go to Cherry and some guests outside on the piazza.
On my right, there's meat, and on my left is vegan. But first, Craig, who's got a burger van. So, Craig, sorry,
Hello.
You're very busy, I know, making burgers. Do you think that your customers are going to dwindle because vegan is so popular at the moment?
No, not at all.
You're not worried?
Not at all, not at all. I think people love meat and they're always going to love meat.
What's so good about meat?
It just tastes amazing. I don't think there's nothing else on the planet that can replace the flavour of a good cheeseburger, for example.
Would you ever do a vegan burger?
We're looking into it, yes, we are looking into it.
What are you going to use?
Oh, I want to say lots of cheese, but obviously it's not vegan, is it?
By the way.
But yeah, it's...
I mean, they're lovely. Is this your bestseller?
A bacon cheeseburger all day long.
I mean, it's a classic, isn't it?
Yes,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Would you ever go vegan?
No!
Never?
Never!
Would you miss it too much?
I would miss it too much. I mean, I don't eat meat all the time, but I need to have it at least once a week.
What about people who say it is cruel, you shouldn't eat meat?
I think if you're using, obviously, the right farming techniques that's ethically sourced, it's OK. I mean, that's sort of how we roll.
All right, so I might come and try that later, but I'm worried about getting food in my teeth, so I'll come back. I also have Biff with me.
Hi.
And his girlfriend, Krista, who make jackfruit burgers.
Yes, burgers out of jackfruit.
What is a jackfruit?
It's a big knobbly thing, about yay big, grown in the tropics. You can get us from Southeast Asia.
But if it's a fruit, surely it's sweet.
Well, we use young jackfruit, so it hasn't sweetened yet, so you can cook flavour into it.
So it's savoury?
Yes, savoury.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Why did you become a vegan?
I think environmental reasons at first, but then when you learn more and more, you start exploring animal welfare, health reasons, lots more.
Yeah. Krista, was it difficult? How long have you been a vegan?
2 years.
Okay, and I know you've been a vegan for a really long time.
Yeah.
Was it difficult watching Biff eat meat at home?
At first, yeah, but we kind of, I realised the best way to kind of try and convert him, which I've obviously successfully managed to do, was to just start engaging with him about, you know, my reasons for being vegan and just showing him how great the food can be. And Biff's a really creative chef, so we're a dream team.
So you catch more flies with vegan honey.
Exactly.
Can I try this burger?
Yeah, so
I've
we've
never
got some
seen a jackfruit
we've made
burger.
so you can see inside the jackfruit,
Isn't
it's
that
very
amazing?
meaty.
It looks like pulled pork.
It's a fantastic substitute.
Okay, I'm just going to do a very quick taste because it's
hopefully we'll
just being very professional. Delicious and savoury. Very good.
Thank you very much.
Well, Sean, I feel like I've lucked out here. They both look really good. Back to you in the studio.
She certainly has lucked out with Craig and Biff there. Look, we can't agree about personal choice here on our panel, but let's talk about the environment, because according to a new report, meat and dairy companies are on track to be the world's biggest contributors to climate change. I mean, that is really shocking when you read that. Above the fossil fuel industry. It's a worry, isn't it, Liz?
Right, I think it's a really interesting report. I read it last week, and it does concern me. It was talking about the 35 largest businesses, and I would imagine they're probably responsible for a significant proportion of all the meat and dairy that we do eat in the world. And I just go back to what I said before. We will have to eat less meat and dairy, but better going forward.
Why not no meat, then?
Well,
let's just take
because I would say, a bit like Naomi, live and let live. If people want to eat meat, then why should they be forbidden from doing so? But also, I'd like to bring this in, because this is something the Soil Association, we've been working on for a long time, and it's this link of grazing livestock with soil health and also with soil organic matter. If we weren't to have livestock at all, especially grazing livestock, what we would have to do is rely far more on inorganic sources of fertilisers in order to grow the crops that we would be eating instead. Yep. That would have an impact, actually, on global emissions and environment as well. Whereas livestock, if they're grazed, actually their overall footprint is pretty neutral.
Oh,
true. Naomi, why are more people going vegan and veggie than we've had before?
Well, I think, like I said, I think that there are valid arguments for going vegan or vegetarian, and I think it's fairly easy to understand why someone would want to, but it really comes down to sort of a personal choice and a personal kind of moral choice. I personally have never had a moral dilemma over eating meat. I think there are certainly arguments to be made about looking at farming and making sure, as Liz was saying, how we can make the process better for the animals, how we can make farming more sustainable, like with environmental issues, but also just to talk about the environmental impact. You know, veganism also has an environmental impact. Growing crops, like growing replacement meats, like lentils, like chickpeas, also has an environmental impact. There isn't a way of not having an environmental impact.
So there was a study that came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's the biggest study of farming and the environmental impact by the University of Oxford. It's the most credible research that's come out. It looked at 40,000 farms, and what it found was that 83% of all farmland is used for animal agriculture, but it's only producing 18% of the calories. If everybody was to adopt a plant-based diet, we would only need in the region of 1/4 of the amount of land we're currently using for farming. So considering we've got species extinction, we've got a loss of biodiversity, this is something that urgently needs addressing.
OK, let's find out what people are saying at home.
Got a comment on
Cherry, what's happening in social media?
Thank you, Sean. Angie says there is real evidence of a plant-based diet being not only healthier for the individual, but the planet. Animals are sentient beings and should not be murdered for food or sport. And John says it's a personal choice that should be respected, just as it's a personal choice to be vegan or vegetarian, which should be equally respected. And Jonathan says, I think that the mass production and killing of animals is wrong. However, people have the right to ultimately choose whether or not they eat meat. And finally, Sue says, if we all went vegetarian, then we would all starve. There would just not be enough areas to grow crops to feed us all. Some quite controversial points.
Controversial, really interesting points. At one point, I just want to... I suppose I'll ask you, Naomi, what do you think? Do you feel there's a lot of pressure from vegans and vegetarians for other people? You've mentioned it before, but is there a sort of a vegan lobby that's shaming people? I mean, we heard Matthew say he equated it to slavery, which is quite a shocking comment, I've got to say. It's way out there, and a lot of people will find that really difficult to take. But you are shaming people.
But that's the issue I have, is, as I said, I respect someone's personal choices. What I don't like is this very sort of political activism side of vegan, where there's sort of an attempt to convert other people. And can I just come back on one thing? I just want to talk about this. Would it be better for the environment to have a plant-based diet? Perhaps it would. I don't think it would be. No. But perhaps let's consider it might be, right? That is still not a reason to give up eating meat. We forget that eating for pleasure and for enjoyment is so essentially human. It's so much part of what makes us human, and that isn't a good enough reason. Like, it's important to enjoy your food. It's important to enjoy what you eat, to take pleasure from it. It's a communal activity.
Okay, well, I want to get the debate back onto the complaints that people feel pressurised.
Yes, okay, so I don't think Matthew and I are saying everyone must stop eating. What we're saying is we must stop eating people, persons, that is to say cows, sheep, goats.
Cows aren't people. Cows aren't people.
For people like Matthew and I beg your pardon, for people like Matthew and I, a person is someone who is aware and sentient of itself. That includes pigs who often have, and this has been proven, intelligence far higher than we assume, sometimes as intelligent as 3 or 4-year-old human children. So to say that they're not sentient, to say that they're not aware, yes, but that's all they can eat because they don't have a lovely vegan
Animals are carnivores for the most part.
This idea that there's a vegan lobby, do you know what is a multi-billion-dollar lobby? The cheese lobby has a multi-billion-dollar lobby. The dairy industry, the beef industry, the pork industry. These are multi-billion-dollar funded lobbies.
As well.
Liz.
Yeah.
Liz.
I mean, I think you're kind of... The anthropomorphism is a problem for everybody other than vegans of the vegan lobby.
Explain. So making
animals people. And they're
but
really...
that's because you've grown up with an ideology that this is acceptable.
No, I'm not sure that's true. I've worked at the Soil Association for 5 years, and actually, you know, our view is very much about less meat but better. Respect the animal's welfare needs and treat it ethically. And actually, you know, we would agree with you that we should be eating a lot less meat, but not completely taking meat out of
Matthew,
house, don't they?
We're out of time. I think what we should all do is go out for lunch, and I won't tell you what's on the menu. Thank you all very much indeed.
All right, thank you.